Today, Campagnolo has finally launched its new Super Record group set. After seeing patents flying around for what must be years, it's great to see the group set actually come to fruition. There have been some significant changes compared to the outgoing Super Record EPS, including a fully wireless transmission, updates to the brakes, gearing options, and of course, some all-new hoods. And yes, sadly, the thumb shifters really have gone. There's clearly a lot to unpack here, so let's start with one of the biggest changes, those brand new wireless hoods. The first thing to know is that, yes, when Campag says wireless, it really is. Much like Sram, each derailleur has its own battery, but unlike Sram, the batteries are not interchangeable. It turns out that Sram actually hold the patent to this technology. So if one of your batteries starts to die during a ride, then you can't swap them around to get you home. Campagnolo says that the batteries can be charged either on or off of the bike via a magnetic cable connector, much like the ones you see with Apple laptops. Charge times are actually pretty good at a claimed 45 minutes to get you from 0 to 90% or 0 to 100% in an hour. And the expected life of those batteries is said to last around 750 kilometers, but that is 750 kilometers of hard riding. Campagnolo has also included some buttons on the inside of the shifters which allow you to turn the system manually on and off. When powered on, the system will only wake up from its standby mode when the bike is moved. So if you're putting the bike in a car for a long journey and you don't want the system to keep waking up because of the rocking motion of the car, then it's a really great way of being able to turn it off and then turn it back on when you're ready to ride. Both levers use standard CR2032 batteries to power them, much like Sram and Shimano, and the access port is really easy to get to. But there are far more interesting things going on with those levers. As mentioned, the thumb shifters have now gone in lieu of two shift buttons behind the brake lever, and they can be set up however you wish via the My Campy app. But from stock, the higher button shifts up and the bottom button shifts down. One issue I was finding when out riding with the new group set is that both buttons feel a little too similar. I would have loved if the buttons had a bit more of a difference in feel between them, so that you can kind of build up a subconscious understanding of which button does what without really having to think about it. Of course, I have only ridden the group set once and it will take some time to get used to, but I felt that it could have just been a little bit more intuitive. The ride we went on took us over some beautiful climbs very close to the Campagnolo factory, and it was rather warm, so I had no need for gloves. That being said, I am a little bit concerned that come winter, and when full-fingered gloves are needed, it might be quite easy to hit the wrong button. It's not just the buttons that are new for these levers, they have been fully redesigned from the ground up, and this has resulted in an all-new shape, one which is claimed to be even more ergonomic. Sadly, I'm going to find it tough to call these levers a vast improvement over the outgoing versions, and there are a few key sticking points that I need to share. First off, there is a rather large gap behind the back of the levers. Now, it's not really an issue when you're riding on the hoods along the flat, but when you're out of the saddle, pulling on the bars, going up a climb, the sharp edges of the shifter housing really dig into your fingers. Also, the shape of the hoods has resulted in a harsher angle on the upper outside edge of the lever. When descending and pulling on the levers, the edge dug into my palms and it did become slightly uncomfortable. Lastly, the rubber used for the hoods has a slight sheen to it, much like the other Campagnolo products. Now, it's not something I've ever really been a huge fan of because they become slippery much faster than the other brands when sweat is on the surface. I think these levers will suit riders with larger hands. For me, they just didn't feel too natural. When riding in a more aggressive, tucked up aero position, it has to be said that gripping the hoods from the sides is really joyous, and the hydraulic reservoirs come up quite high, so you do have quite a lot to hold on to. But then of course, this means that you can't cup them from the top. I'm also slightly disappointed that the shifters don't have the magic buttons in the same way that Shimano Ultegra or Dura-Race does, those being the programmable buttons that are on top of the reservoirs. Now, Campag claimed that its aim was to focus on the riding experience and to allow riders to fully immerse themselves while on the bike. For me, the extra buttons would have really aided in this process, as it would mean that you can tuck up on a fast section of road and then dial in your gears as and when you need to without needing to change your position. Onto the brake levers themselves, and they still have a really classic Campagnolo feel to them. They're curving, they feel soft, and they're smooth on the fingers. The lever reach can be easily adjusted via a Torx head bolt found on the front and accessed via a hole in the lever. It's the performance of the brakes that really does this new group set justice. They really are quite good. As I said, the ride that I went on with this new setup had a good few climbs in it, which also meant there were a good few descents. The characteristics that I really enjoyed were how smooth and how progressive they felt. There was no instant bite, just the reassuring, gentle sound of pad making contact with the rotor. As you pull on the levers more and more, the power ramps up at the same level, and despite my best efforts, I had a really hard time of locking the wheels up. I had to pull on the levers uncharacteristically hard to get them to do so. So they left me feeling in control and not lacking too much in the way of power. I got the impression that in a potentially dangerous situation, if I were to grab the brakes really hard, it wouldn't skid out. While brakes and shifters are obviously very interesting, I think we should probably turn our attention to the big step forward Campag has made with this group set. The fact that it's wireless. Now, there's not actually a great deal to say about it, since we are quite used to the concept of wireless drivetrains. They have been around for a while, and finally, Campagnolo has caught up. During my first ride, there were no connectivity issues. It just worked. The bigger change which needs addressing is the change in gearing and gear ratios. The top line figures run as follows. There will be 3 cassette options, a 1025, a 1027, and a 1029. Chainring options will be a 5034, a 4832, and a 4529. Campag made one of its key design pillars to create the perfect cadence, so they have kept single tooth jumps towards the bottom of the block and jumps of between 2 and 3 teeth when you get into the easier gears. Now, when riding the group set, I did find that changes in cadence were fantastic. I was never left searching for the right gear. It was always just right there. You just had to shift to it. Purely from a cadence and gear ratio point of view, I was incredibly satisfied. However, I wasn't as impressed with the shifting itself, and not just for one reason. First off, the sheer sound the drivetrain was making when shifting was incredibly loud. In a way, there's something quite satisfying about hearing the metallic ping of your gears as you change them, but I was finding that the new Super Record was unnecessarily loud and almost obnoxious. Secondly, the shifts themselves weren't always super smooth. There was one particular climb which was maybe 10%, and when I went to go shift up at the back of the block, I was on the receiving end of that typical gear crunching, chain slipping over cassette noise before it finally found its place. Now, I wouldn't bring it up if it were an isolated incident, as it's fair that I could have been the thing to blame. However, there were a handful of missed shifts which left me lacking in a little bit of confidence. That being said, it wasn't constant. For every slightly dodgy shift, there will have been 10 or more perfectly seamless ones. But until I can spend more time with the bike and really start to gel with the group set, I am certainly a little disappointed in this regard. It's not just the shifting at the rear that leaves a little to be desired, but I was finding the front derailleur not to be as fast as Shimano. There was an ever so slight hesitation which I picked up on. Now again, this is something which I'll be conducting some side-by-side testing on with rival group sets, but from the offset, it wasn't a great first impression. I'd like to look away from the functionality of the group set and address some of the other parts which make up what is undoubtedly a huge step forwards for the historic brand. Firstly, its aesthetics. Now, this will be down to pure personal preference, and you're more than welcome to disagree with me down in the comments. But at the moment, I'm not entirely sure I'm sold on the looks. I feel it's missing some of that iconic Campagnolo Italian flair. It's not jumping out at me, flaunting itself in the same way that previous generations of Super Record have. To me, it gives the impression of something that's been designed by democracy rather than a passionate, family-owned component manufacturer. It has a mass-market, second-tier feel, just without the mass-market price tag. Which, as we come onto it, is a tough pill to swallow. The new Campagnolo Super Record wireless group set will cost £4,499 or $5,399 or €5,200. That means the new group set will cost significantly more than SRAM Red and Shimano Dura-Ace in a power meter spec bundle. And sadly, the price for the Super Record does not include a power meter. I'm led to believe that in the future we will have the option, which will come in at an even higher price point. But right now, it's certainly a lot to ask, especially when you consider its other flaws. A power meter is not the only piece of tech that appears to be missing, as currently there are no satellite shifters, which again, Campagnolo say should be coming in the future, but not yet. My overall takeaway from this first interaction with the new group set is a real mixed bag. There are parts that I really do like, the braking, the cassette options, and the eventual embrace of wireless technology. But I'm also left with a lot of doubts and concerns. I wonder if Campagnolo created this group set out of passion or necessity, and my gut tells me that it's the latter. I wish it captured more of the flair, the excitement, and the heritage that the brand is known for. This is no full review, and I'm very keen to get my hands on a Super Record equipped bike for far more extensive testing. But in the meantime, let me know, what do you think of the new group set from Campagnolo? Do you think you could spend that amount of money for something which is potentially as flawed as it is? Let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please do drop it a like, subscribe to the channel for more content, and I will see you again very soon.